Welcome to Beyond the Margins, the podcast, the place where we engage, educate, empower, and elevate. I'm your lead learner and host, Dr. Sohn A. Each week, I sit down with some of the brightest minds and dynamic leaders in education to challenge traditional narratives, especially those shaping the experiences of students at the margins. Together, we explore new ways to reimagine schools, classrooms, and learning communities as spaces for growth and transformation. At Beyond the Margins, we center students too often overlooked, sharing the stories, strategies, and ideas that matter most. Voices long pushed aside are brought to the center. Welcome to Beyond the Margins. Did you know more than 1/3 of students report feeling bored in class, and only about 1 in 10 say they truly enjoy school? This is according to a 2025 Gallup study. That means for most students, school isn't a place of curiosity or excitement. It's something they get through. It's something that they endure. Today, we're tackling a critical question. What does it take to make learning irresistible? Not compliant, not quiet, not controlled, but truly engaging. Today, I'm joined by a dynamic educator, speaker, and student engagement agent, Mr. Stephen Boyd. With over 25 years of experience as a teacher, administrator, and nationally recognized trainer, Stephen has helped schools across the country transform classrooms from struggling to soaring. Through his Contagious teacher framework, he equips educators with real strategies that reduce behavioral issues and increase authentic engagement. Help me welcome Mr. Stephen Boyd to Beyond the Margins. Mr. Stephen Boyd, welcome.
Thank you so much, man. I'm so excited to be a part of your show today.
So look, before we jump in, tell us about your journey through the profession. Tell us about, how you got started and maybe some of the turns you took along the way.
So, one of the things that most people don't know about me is I'm actually a musician. And so my transition into education came through music education. I started playing the drums at the age of 2. My parents tell me that I was singing Andre Crouch, Jesus is the answer for the world today at the age of, that was at 2. I was playing drums at 5. And then I started playing classical piano at the age of 8.
Wow.
And then as I matriculated through, I became like a church musician and I started directing choirs. And so the whole idea of engaging and teaching really started out in the faith-based space through the church and through music. And then I started to really take that whole idea of teaching music, and it became a knack in terms of wanting to do it in the classroom. And so got my first teaching job in 1997, hating myself. I actually started out in elementary music, teaching. It was a split position at that time, but my goal was always to kind of do what I'm doing now. I never saw myself as a teacher, wanted to be in the classroom, but for so long I wanted to travel the world and speak. I wanted to travel the world and sing and
Yeah.
perform, and I wanted to be on stage. But as time would have it, it took some time for me to eventually get to this place. But I'm grateful for the journey along the way because honing in on my teaching skills, honing in on people skills and building relationships and using different kind of instructional strategies and stuff like that has helped inform what I do on the K-12 space and even on the platforms that I'm on and speaking platforms. So I use some of that education to engage audiences and engage people in professional learning places.
Nice. Skills transfer. Skills don't
Yeah.
stay in one place. And you said you're dating yourself. I grew up on a little Andre Crouch and the Mighty
Yeah.
Clouds of Joy.
Come on now.
Yeah. So those are constant sounds in my childhood as well. So as we look at, the elapsing of time, what are some things that have changed in students and what are some things that have stayed the same over your 25-year career in education?
One thing that stayed the same is the fact that all students want and need relationships. So in my company, SB Entertainment, we're creating content for our K-12 audiences, although we do music content. And so one of the things that we did about 5, 6 years ago during the pandemic is created this idea of what makes a master teacher. And we termed it as contagious teaching. And one of the things that we saw when we did a qualitative comparison of different evaluation models, no
Mhm.
matter if it was New York, Tennessee, Florida, when it came to evaluating teacher effectiveness and mastery, what were these different states asking? But what we found, there were more similarities, there were differences. And so what we did was actually kind of synthesize that into a framework called the Contagious Teaching Framework, one
Okay.
of which is, we talked about it on our show, connection. So what
Yeah.
has stayed the same with kids is connection. All
Yeah.
children, from the time that they're born, even to our age, everybody wants the sense that somebody cares. There's a relationship that they can make, and that relationship becomes the springboard for them to be able to achieve. So that's remained the constant. I think what has changed is uh, the technology richness of this world compared to, you know, when I first
Right.
started, almost 30 years ago. Obviously, we came during the information age and computers and different things of that nature. But the application of technology, the fact that technology's got smaller compared to having a PC 30 years ago, the fact that I have a PC in my hand, literally in my phone, to now AI technology, the speed at which technology has changed in 30 years has very much changed, and uh, as a result, it's changed how we are even going to have to teach our children because, as we talked about a little earlier, children are coming out of the womb with a technological algorithm that they know how to use, smart devices at 8 and 9 months, when we just get
Mhm.
started at 28 and 38. So we have to kind of keep up with that rhythm. So that's really what's changed over the years.
Yeah, and we're going to talk more about Contagious Teacher University. But as we think about some of these changes, when did you have your tipping point or watershed moment around student engagement as you were coming through the ranks and cutting your chops, so to speak, in education?
Well, one of the things that when I reflect on my time is I've always been an engaging speaker, an engaging teacher, just very kinesthetic, very hands-on, very dramatic in my presentation. But when it came time to pivot in that watershed moment with respect to professional development, I was actually in administration as an assistant principal. At that time in the state of Maryland, proportionate discipline was kind of like the big thing,
Okay.
where the state board and state mandates wanted school districts to try to do what they could to ensure that they would not disproportionately discipline students who were black and brown at 2 or 3 times their white counterparts for the same infraction. And so when you look at that data statewide, the data state data was overwhelmingly we're not talking about guns, we're not talking about knives, we're really not talking about fights. The lion's share of the data was classroom disruption, disrespect, some other things that was overwhelmingly the biggest data. And where do all those things start? They start in the classroom. And while there are some objective things that happen, some of those things are subjective. So how do we kind of increase the objectivity and decrease the subjectivity? At the time, I had gone to look at some trainings, brought it to the principal, kind of rejected. So I said, no problem. I went and actually attended some classroom management trainings and was completely floored by the presentation and excited about bringing it back. But in that, it also inspired me to want to build my own platforms focused on helping teachers master classroom management at that time.
Yeah.
And then, of course, as I began to build the company, not only is our focus on classroom management, but also student engagement, because we believe the two really works as a hand in the glove. If the students are adequately engaged, then you can manage the class. Or if you can manage the class, then you can adequately engage. That really gives the teacher an opportunity to shine, so that when it comes to an evaluation or giving teacher feedback, I can give you better feedback when the kids are not bouncing off the walls.
Right.
I can really
Right.
see what you can do as a
Right.
teacher so that the feedback I give to you as an administrator is real, qualitative and quantitative feedback that will help the learners grow. So those were
Yeah.
the things that really helped inspire my pivot, and bring me to the place where I am today.
So yeah, now we getting down into your framework around what it takes to be a contagious teacher.
Yeah.
And in addition to classroom management, what are some of those other, essential qualities and traits we must see to truly be contagious?
Well, one of the first trainings that we created under my brand was a training called "I'm Not Bad, I'm Just Bored," and we really dived into brain-based understanding, helping teachers understand how the brain works and why student engagement has to be very, very consistent, and for learning to be consistent. And then, as you know, with creating more content, we kind of took "I'm Not Bad, and Just Bored" and supersized it to now what we call contagious teaching. And so contagious teaching is really all about helping learners. What is it that a teacher is doing that really makes that classroom a fun place for one learner to wanna be there compared to another teacher where that learner just doesn't wanna be there. And what we found when we did this, comparison research, there were 4 things that we found
Mhm.
among all the different kinds of evaluation models that was consistent, and we synthesized it into 4 Cs.
Okay.
Those 4 C's, the first C is connection, and the big idea behind connection is before you can get me to learn, you have to relate to me. There has to be a relationship with that student, all right, in order for that student to move them from the emotional to the logical. And of course, we took some of the I'm not bad, I'm just bored as relates to brain-based learning and brain-based development. And that seems to be a mantra that I always talk about in all my presentations so that
Mhm.
teachers can have a respect for the brain and how the brain works, and particularly the developing brain and how to pull that brain into their orbit so they can adequately move that student from an emotional space to a logical space. So the first thing that yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, 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 and that's a great point, and you're right, connection is a fundamental place to start, and it's so many adolescents particularly, so many competing brain chemicals,
Mhm,
competing, right? And it's overwhelming, so we have to tap into not
mhm,
only the dopamine that wants them to engage with academics, but
yep.
have a understanding of the other things that's going on. But please continue. You were at the first C, connection.
Yeah, so first seed connection, and again, you mentioned chemicals like dopamine, serotonin. We talk about cortisol and all those types of things, and why connection is important. And then we move into the next C, which is called context. So context is very much understanding when we talked about the marketing piece. Do you know your buyer? Do you know your customer? And so when we talk about context, the big idea here is to learn the context in order to superimpose the content with the
Mhm.
context. And so when we're really talking to teachers about that, again, if we talk about UBD and backward mapping, we know that the
Right.
publisher has given you ideas about what you want the students to learn or the process and context standards. That's great. But what we
Mhm.
want you to do is learn the learner to the point where you superimpose your context of the audience in front of you and take what the curriculum says and figure out how to marry the two so that Stephen Boyd sees relevance and
Yeah.
sees connection in the math problem, in the social studies, in the English, in the science, where now you have a learner that's not sitting in the chair, but you have a bought in learner who's now to really take ownership. So, two things that we talk about that is really pivotal in contagious teaching in terms of a definition. We talk about it being a teacher generated environment where that teacher creates an opportunity to do two things: create ownership and excitement. We talked about what ownership is, and we talked about excitement. Well,
Yeah.
it is qualitative and quantitative, so that's why we really wanted to make sure those two words were in that definition. When we talk about context,
Mhm.
you're not only able to build the incitement, but now because Stephen Boyd sees a math problem that talks about the local corner store down the street from his house in the math problem, now you've built ownership.
Yeah.
Now there's a greater level of buy-in that I want to learn more about this math problem because you talked about Mitchell's Market. That's right the street from my house.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
wait, you talked about I know the man that you talked about the man that sells fish. I know Mr. John, right?
Yeah.
But you superpose that context into the content for
Mhm.
familiarity, for that excitement, and for that ownership. So that's the context piece.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and things like backwards mapping, universal design, they
Yeah,
only work if you have that context.
if you only have that context.
Right, right,
Exactly.
right. And so many times we jump past go,
Yeah,
um, with building connection that will give you the context that
yeah.
you need for everything else.
Exactly. Yeah. And we have to always remember that these companies that produce and publish these papers, these books and, online kinds of things, they're doing the same type of research. And so they're trying to build context in their platforms and in their books and stuff like that. And that's fine and good because that's what makes them relevant. But
Mhm.
when it comes to who's sitting in the chair, you're just as smart as them. So take the information from the children that are sitting right in front of you and superimpose their context along with the context of the publisher and create the kind of ownership that you really, really want so that the students that are sitting there, you know, are now bought in. There's this great
Right,
level of buy-in.
right.
And so we have context, then we have connection, but then thirdly, we have what's called content. For
Mhm.
content, we really are focusing on now the explicit instruction, okay? And so traditionally, explicit instruction is I do, we do, you do. But what we've done is kind of superimposed that and kind of broke it up and kind of put it together in a different execution that we ask for teachers to try. We ask them to teach, yes, based on I do, you do, we do, but we're asking you to do it from a backward mapping perspective
Mhm.
where once you've looked at the standards and know what that those standards are asking for, if it's an 8-week unit, what we want you to do is do it in a basic, moderate, and advanced or mastery approach. And so essentially, let's just say I take one lesson on maybe day one of a lesson. Okay, day
Mhm.
one of a lesson, I'm introducing something new. All right. And once I take my attendance and kind of do a couple of warm ups, and then when I'm getting ready to teach it, we ask teachers to consider framing the beginning of your teaching like this. All right, class, today we're going to be learning about the quadratic equation, which I don't know anything about, but I'll use that for an example.
Yeah.
And what I'm going to do is we're going to take about 20 minutes and I'm going to teach you about the quadratic equation. But what I'm going to do is the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to teach you how to do it at a basic level. And after that, then I'm going to take a little assessment. And then class, we're going to do something where it gets a little bit harder. That'll be at the middle level. But I'm only going to do one or two problems at each level. And then we'll do something that's very, very hard. Each time, class, I'm going to kind of just have you guys put your whiteboards up so I kind of assess. But then I'm going to move on. And then class at the end, we'll break up into our groups and then we'll work on mastering. Hey, class, are we all good with that? Well, what did I just do when I told them up front what we're going to do? We're going to do something that's basic, then I'll formally assess. Then we'll do
Mhm.
something that's a little bit harder, then I formally assess something. Let's just say that's 30 to 45 minutes worth of instruction. Well, what
Mhm.
did I just do? Number one, I created predictability. Wow, it's
Predictability.
not going to take all night.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be bored. Oh,
And that's
good, right?
big. That's a
Right?
big
I
deal.
created predictability. Okay.
Yeah.
I created a sense of safety. I've made a contract with those kids. You say we're going to do one or two. So the goal here is when we talk about the content piece is to say that master teachers or contagious teachers focus on quality of instruction and not quantity of instruction. So
Okay.
I'm not just trying to teach because I have a 90-minute block, which 30 minutes kids finish the lesson in they finished the lesson in 10 minutes and now they're sitting for the next 85 minutes playing their
And
games.
and
I've
they
now
say the
go ahead.
classic saying, "I'm finished my work."
Exactly. I've
Yeah,
finished my
yeah,
work.
yeah.
Now I'm spreading the work out purposefully with an understanding of I want to get to mastery level, but I need to see evidence that all the kids can attain it at a basic level, and then I formatively assess it. Maybe I might reteach, maybe I might do one more, but the goal is to only do exactly what's necessary. As my grandfather used to say, you're going to eat the meat and spit out the bones. All right. So I'm just not going to do 5 problems or 5 examples just to do 5 examples. I'm going to do 5 examples that are basic level. Then I'm going to do 5 examples in that map that are a little bit more moderate and then mastery. And then differentiate to embed and mesh greater skill towards the greater mastery. If you are looking for maybe 80% of the class to get at mastery level, then of course, then I'm going to work on that through my differentiation. So the
Yeah.
content piece is to kind of get teachers to flip using their time more purposely, where they're focusing on quality of the explicit instruction. I do, we do, you do, but focusing on basic, moderate, and advanced, and then focusing on differentiation.
And so with that, it usually takes very intentional professional development to get a whole staff to begin to look at lesson planning and lesson development
Mhm,
through a lens of a student-centric backwards mapping
mhm.
and maybe starting at non-traditional places. So how do you get teachers to buy in and how do you support them in that transition?
Well, it starts with, just baby steps in terms of we want you to just try this and then give us feedback on that. All right. And then, of course, giving them different types of formative assessment strategies, thumb up, thumb down, whiteboards, stand up, sit down, those types of things. And of course, making it fun and engaging in terms of that, getting their feedback and then say, okay, what would it look like if you got that kind of feedback? If you just focused on 2 problems at that level, give us feedback on that. Now, what does it look like? What does this science standard look like at a moderate level? What are students be able to know and do that's at a moderate level. Talk to us about that. Engaging the teachers in those conversations to help us unpack the standards to say, okay, could students be able to do, at least give you any kind of ample evidence if you did one problem or two problems, no
Mm.
more than three, then I do, we do, you do, all right, in terms of that. And then getting them to really skim it down so you can focus the kids and focus them, and then asking them, just kind of starting, again, the same way you do the kids, we have to do that from a professional development standpoint by piecemealing it with staff so that you build that ownership. How do you eat an elephant? One little bite at a
Right at
time,
the top. Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
you'll have some that would jump on board, but then some would jump on board. You have to pull them because you don't want them to kind of get into the car. You're racing at 185 miles an hour, you crash. So it's good for the ones that are the go-getters, and then
Mhm.
it's also good for the ones that are apprehensive to kind of
Okay.
have them experience some success and then come back to you and say, okay, what can I do now? Or give us some feedback. How'd you feel about that? Okay, let's go to the next.
Nice. So we have connection,
Yes,
we have
sir.
context, and
Mhm.
we have content.
Content. And the final C is containment. All
Okay.
right. Containment is where we take, I'm not bad, I'm just bored. We expand the conversation around brain-based learning, where we get more into the limbic system and executive functioning, but more so from this standpoint that you treat the brain like a container. So I often say when I'm doing this professional development, hey, you went out to, Texas Roadhouse, man, you had a nice steak, man, you
Mm.
had some potatoes on the side, man, you got some asparagus, you had a nice root beer, you had a good time, but man, the steak was way, way too much, man. Oh my God, you just couldn't eat all that. All right, so you grab a container. Well, why are you going to container? Because you're going to put it away, you're going to pop it in the refrigerator to eat it later. Well, depending on how long it takes, you pop it out, pop it in the microwave. Man, doesn't it taste fresh? Doesn't it taste good? Well, what we say is that student engagement is much like that container. The goal is to use games, use kinesthetic learning, use that when we talk about Europe, you and I are the generation where they taught us about the learning pyramid. So I
Yeah.
reintroduced that research in this part of the professional development where we talk about the passive learning is lecture and writing, reading, and that the active learning is kinesthetic, is, teaching each other. So we use that as a framework to put in the teacher's minds to say, let's flip this in a way that we know actually teaches children learn. So to contain the flavor,
Mhm.
to contain the nutrients. And so in addition to the learning pyramid and in addition to making sure they come back to this whole idea of brain-based learning, we're trying to get them to understand that if you close the container, it keeps things fresh, it keeps things flavorful, and it increases the buy-in of the student. And so the whole goal there is to take the teachers even through some project-based activities, have them create some games. So like, just the game show network,
Mm.
hey, could you create a Family Feud version in your science class? Could you create some cards? Could you create some other kinds of activities? What kinds of activities could you do, hopefully in every unit, once or twice a week, that will get the students up and moving, where you're reviewing content, you're building critical thinking, but you're doing it in a fun way to contain and retain the content and process knowledge. There's not been one school that we work with or teacher that we work with that has not seen the difference between how they traditionally taught compared to when they started to increase the engagement, when they compared their formative assessments, their exit tickets and different things like that. There's not
Yeah.
been one that said, wow, I saw a big difference when I started to really incorporate some games more consistently. And so what we help to do is help them to synthesize that activity. And then how can you do it more consistently if it's an 8-day lesson, every other day, or, maybe at the end of a lesson, or the
Mm.
first thing at the beginning of a lesson, or in the middle of a lesson. Just be more consistent, be that predictability, because what you're trying to do is increase retention through containment.
Beyond the Margins, the podcast. We'll return in a moment.
Your Divine Journey, LLC, is here to walk with you through life's ups and downs. Whether you're seeking therapy, life coaching, support, or personal consultations, we provide a safe, empowering space to heal, grow, and step into your best self. Your journey is unique. Let's make it divine. Connect with us today and start moving forward with clarity, confidence, and peace. www.yourdivinejourneyllc.
At the Travel Bureau, we are dedicated to creating bespoke luxury experiences for the discerning traveler, specializing in detail-rich journeys designed with heart and intention. We turn your dream getaway into a beautiful, curated reality. Wherever you're going, the Travel Bureau will get you there in style, comfort, and joy.
If you're teaching urban, alternative, or non-traditional students and wondering why engagement feels harder than ever, the new book by Dr. Sohn A is for you. Unlocking Student Engagement isn't theory. It's real strategies for real classrooms, built on trust, relevance, and relationships. And educators across the country are already responding. Unlocking Student Engagement debuted at #1 in cultural pedagogies, philosophy and social aspects of education, educational professional development, and educational certification and development. Grab your copy today wherever you buy books, and let's change how engagement shows up in our classrooms.
Welcome back to Beyond the Margins.
So what are some telltale signs as you do this work, as you go into schools and you go into classrooms? When you walk into a room, what are some telltale signs that they're missing the connection, the context, the content, and the container? How do you know student engagement is failing upon sight?
Well, you have students that are doodling, you have students that are falling asleep, you have students that are on their cell phone, you have one student in the class that's sitting in front that's paying attention, but there are 30 students that are in the class. So those are some telltale signs, body language, students that are talking to each other right away, and of course, if you sit there for 2 minutes, you can tell, but in 15 minutes, it could be a telltale sign. And if you ask for some exit tickets, you know, see what happens if you got 30 kids, but 2 out of 30, maybe got a 60% while the rest of them failed. That's your quantitative evidence. And so being able to have this conversation with the teacher to first say, "Hey, how do you feel about it?" But that's not good. So, as with always, you have these conversations, you don't want to sound accusatory, it sound like you need to change something. You all, "Hey, how do you feel about this? What do you think about this?" And then that begins the conversation about maybe some pedagogical things that we can begin to introduce.
Yeah, and that brought to mind another question. That question is, what is the role of a teacher's energy and identity in fostering an environment where student engagement is authentic and real in the classroom? What
Well,
is the role there?
yeah, the role of the energy is, 1,000%. As we've always said, kids don't care really how much you know until they know how
Yeah,
much you care.
very
And
true.
so the bad thing about undergrad training, teacher training, is we spend a lot of time on the content,
Yeah,
mastering the content, trying to
yeah,
pass the praxis, right?
yeah, yeah,
All the quantitative things, be able to get in there. But in terms of the essence of what we
yeah,
bring to that, right? That's not something that's caught. That's something that's just who you are. And
yeah,
so there is something that you really do have to work on your persona and your delivery and your acting skills to
yeah,
bring the flavor, to bring the message, right? Like a preacher. You got to bring the heat, right? In your way. And so for some teachers, it's almost like a butterfly, a caterpillar transforming into a butterfly. It takes some metamorphosis, but you got to
yeah.
be committed to that metamorphosis. And once that energy is there, then your kids will buy in when you find your secret sauce.
Yeah, you know what? I find that students buy in and everyone's secret sauce is really the same thing.
Yeah,
Everyone's secret sauce is authenticity.
yeah.
Kids don't care who you are so
Mhm,
much that you're being real,
mhm.
you predictable. They know what
Yeah,
they're getting from day to day,
yeah,
and you do not change up.
yeah.
If they know who you are, that gives them the safety and security to trust, which then triggers their ability to engage. And so I'm glad you brought that out. And so I know it's true that many new teachers in particular, and some veteran teachers as well,
Yeah.
they carry personas of what they think an educator is or should be. And
Mhm.
a lot of times that leads to burnout
Yeah.
and from my summation.
Mhm.
So here's a question. what are some strategies to deflect burnout, especially, teaching is hard work.
Yeah.
It's demanding work. So,
Mhm.
so how can we keep teachers, especially good teachers who are doing good work, engaging students at a high level from burning out?
Well, the first thing is when you leave at 4:05, 3:25, 3:45, whatever your contract says, when you leave, you have to leave teaching at the door. And then secondly, you're going to have a personal life. You're going to have some self-care strategies that you do for yourself. In the beginning, of course, you know how we are. We're all gun ho. We're staying there till 7 o'clock at night because, man, we're really committed to this work and we're doing that. But then all of a sudden, you find yourself, you're tired all the time, you're stressed out. So the first thing is you have to find a reasonable time to leave. And then secondly, you have to make sure that you have some self-care strategies. And thirdly, make sure you don't forget about family and friends and other people that really care about you. And I know that's not anything that comes out of an encyclopedia or that's Google, but those are just common sense that the same things that kids need, you need as a superintendent, as a principal, as a teacher. And so make sure you do what fills your bucket and let school be school. The other thing is make sure if you're grading papers or you're doing lesson plans, block a specific time to do it only during that time.
Yeah.
Protect your time, protect your energy. All right. The next thing, just to kind of bring this up, because these are some unfortunate pivotal topics, is have boundaries for your kids. I would not recommend a staff member share any friend requests with students,
Yeah.
in terms of, or, if you have a specific Google voice or a Google number, if a kids get contact with you, use some kind of intermediary communication device, but make sure you protect your time even in terms of that, because that's vitally important to just make sure your boundaries are protected.
Yeah, that's very true. Teachers usually want to pour out everything,
Right. Yeah.
and
And you
in
just
that
can't.
pouring out of everything, we don't stop. And
Yeah.
so it's important to, cork the bottle at some point
Yeah.
and replenish self. Do you have two or three strategies you can give a teacher out there who is battling boredom in their classroom,
Yeah.
who's battling
Absolutely.
disengagement?
Well, here's a strategy I'll share. So, as a part of my show, I always do what's called the contagious teaching tip of the day.
Mm.
And so, one of the things in terms of strategies that I encourage the teachers to do, the same way we do an exit ticket, here's a strategy I'd like for you to try. Do an entry ticket. So an
Nice.
entry ticket. So the same way that you formally assess at the end of a class, you can use an entry ticket to either predict prior knowledge, or maybe you could do an entry ticket to make a fun kind of way for them to come in, maybe just to take an educated guess. All right, so
Yes.
do an entry ticket as students are coming in, if it's on some kind of flashcard card or whatever. Hey, they have to make a prediction or get the right answer. Make it fun.
Yep.
They're walking in. Hey, I don't know. I want you to try it before you come in.
Yep.
And they make a guess, right? If they make a guess, they come in. If they don't, maybe say, hey, go to the back of the line, or hey, I'm coming back to you. Go ahead and have a seat. Take it with you. I'm gonna come back to you. What that does is not only does it kind of get my what's called the limbic system in the brain, or with the emotional center, right? I get my limbic system because you're creating a memory, you're creating
Mm.
feelings, but then it also moves students to a logical space. So where I'm coming out of the hallway and I'm laughing and giggling with my friends and I'm stuff like that, all of a sudden now you have my attention and I'm coming from the emotional to the logical, but at the same time, you're making me feel good about the logical space.
Yeah.
And then I'm entering in the classroom in a thinking space versus all just in emotional space. So
Yeah.
try an entry ticket for those particular reasons. Another thing I always like to do is,
Let me say something about your entry ticket idea. I think
yeah,
that's a wonderful idea, and I think it's also a great way to gauge the SEL temperature as students come into your room. It
yeah,
can, yeah, they love the cognitive academic function. Hey, look, give this thing a try, and certainly that can get students engaged with what you're about to do. But I think it can also have a function of finding out where are you right now as we
yeah.
get ready to jump into some cognitive things.
Yeah, yeah. Because if you could tell if Steven is just not with it today,
Yeah.
at the door, at the door is where I can kind of check the temperature. And that's very, very
Mhm.
good. I'm very, very good at, and I'm sure when you talk about Dr. Cho, we talked about, getting your first days of school.
Yeah.
greeting students at the door. I'm very big on that because when teachers complain about they're not getting together, I got to get them set. Well, if you set the thermostat at the door, that's less adjustment that you have to do. So
Yeah.
in the spirit of that SEL, being able to predict where Stephen is a great predictor of the SEL.
Yeah, perfect.
Mhm.
Here's the next question. What are some common mistakes that schools or teachers might make while trying to fix, repair, or otherwise patch up student disengagement?
Well, here's the thing. I am very, very big on proactive strategies. In one of my articles, people can look it up, called the ATM method. All right. Is the whole idea of being able to teach behaviors, don't tell behaviors. Okay. And so the ATM methods, A means to assume nothing. That means when Stephen Boyd is coming and Sean Butts is coming to my class, I am assuming that you do not know how to behave. I'm assuming that you are the worst student in the world. And I'm assuming that T, I'm going to teach you every behavior that you need to be successful in my class. And you can use the explicit instruction model. I do, we do, you do. So to some secondary, maybe middle school teachers, it may sound quite elementary, but for those that have this mindset, it saves you time and students respect you for it. Because in the same way that a football coach would show you how to carry a football properly, how to line up an offensive line, certain defensive stance, how to shoot properly. Why is it okay in those contexts, but it's not okay in a
Yeah.
classroom context? So,
You know,
number one, you need to show me how to walk into this classroom. I do, we do, you do. This is
cl-
how we walk into the class. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
yeah,
Sorry.
clear expectations are so important.
Yeah.
And
But I'm taking it past expectations. I'm talking
okay,
about actually modeling those expectations
gotcha.
and I do in a instructional way. In my classroom, I want you to be successful. And because you're going to be the top class in my music class, and we're going to be the top choir, it's important that we all have an understanding of what behavior looks like. So when you walk into my class, look at me, class. This is how we walk into my class, right? And you break it down into small systemic kind of, this is how your head should be. This is where your hand should be. Hey, here we go. Let's do it together. I do. We do. Now I'm going to sit back. I'm going to watch every one of you to do it too. This is how we sharpen my pencil. This is how we sit down. This is how we raise our hand. This is how we go get a piece of tissue. This is how we ask to go to the bathroom. This is how we go get a computer. Anything that could potentially take away and distract from the ebb and flow of your classroom becomes a skill to be taught, not told, a skill to be taught. And so that's vitally important because you're creating that schemata in the mind frame of that student in the same way that Steph Curry did 300 jump shots from one spot on the floor until
Muscle
he get
memory.
muscle memory. It's all
Yeah.
about muscle memory, right? 300 shots from one spot so when he gets in the game, he can shoot and walk away, be halfway in the court and just, right?
Yeah.
I'm creating the schemata. I'm creating the muscle memory and I'm not assuming, I'm teaching. And then finally the M of ATM. So we got the first is assume nothing. T is teach everything, but M is monitor and assess.
Okay.
So the whole idea is to come back to and review specific behaviors. It doesn't necessarily have to be anything bad, but it could be something that either, and what I encourage is break your lesson plan, break your calendar down into what gets done daily, what gets maybe once or twice a week, and then what you'll come back to monthly. What that does, it consistently reminds students this is what great a classroom looks like for me in this classroom.
Right.
And
Right.
this is what separates the average teacher from the contagious teacher. So being able to have that mindset that can, there's another model called Teach Twos. I call it ATM. There's another model, they call it Teach Twos. I'm teaching to the behavioral expectations. I'm not assuming you know. And I'm not that's just telling you, all right, I'm telling you guys, when you come in, you need to sit down. Here's your assigned seat. And we're verbalizing that. I'm moving away from that model. I am going to become the compass by which we are going to direct and we're going to go due north. That's going to separate the men from the boys, the women from the girls, the great teachers from the average.
Hey, look, this is a great conversation. Before we wrap, I have another question. What's one myth about student behavior that you would love to disrupt?
That, students are born this way. And we know there are those that have neurological and biological presuppositions to certain types of behaviors. But, the prevalence of those are very, very small compared to those of us who we are who we are through learned behavior. So
Mhm.
I want to bust up the myth that because I come from a certain address, that everybody that comes from a certain address, well, that's just the way those people are. If bad behavior is learned, then good behavior can also be learned.
Yeah.
And since students are with us 6.5, sometimes 7, sometimes 8 hours a day, you and I have an opportunity to help them build new skills and unlearn some bad skills. So everything can be taught and everything can be caught. Let's kind of swing it in a positive direction.
Yeah, we have power that we leave on the table when we
Yeah.
don't realize that that is true. Hey, look, man, thank you for being with us.
Yes,
But
sir.
what's next for you? And how can the Beyond the Margins audience stay in touch and follow your work?
You can visit me at www.iamstephenboyd.com. Follow me on social media at I am Stephen Boyd on Facebook and on Instagram, on LinkedIn at LinkedIn, I am Stephen Boyd now. You can find me on LinkedIn. And of course, you can shoot me an email at seboyd74@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you if you're a principal superintendent looking to have a conversation about professional development. I'm also a keynote speaker as well. So if you look for somebody to kick your school year off in great fashion, last year we toured a speech called Put Your Game Face On. It was
Mm.
all about helping teachers have resilience in those last quarters when things are just really helter-skelter. We had a great time of touring that on last year. What's next for us is I'm a part of a leadership cohort that'll be in Mexico in June. So I'm excited about that. Also towards the end of June, we'll be in Florida at the Florida Early Childhood Conference. It's kind of something like that. We're presenting there in conference. And then we're also doing some professional development with the school district in Mississippi on helping the principals coach the teachers as to get the teachers to elevate up Bloom's taxonomy. And we're going to be doing some professional development with training those principals as to how to get the teachers to draw more out of the students, but we're going to be coaching the principals when they do their walkthroughs or some of their post, observation conversations so that we can get out of just the recall stage and the answer stage and then build more critical thinking. So that's coming up in the month this summer as well. So we're really excited about that.
Yeah, man, sounds like you're super busy. Thank you for your hard work. Thank you for sharing best practices and sharpening us as educators wherever you are doing the work. And look, from one SB to another SB, thank you for going beyond the margins. We'll have you back soon.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much to your audience. Thank
you
you for your time.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Today, Stephen Boyd didn't just give us strategies. He gave us a shift in mindset. He reminds us that behavior isn't just managed, it's taught. This episode pushes us to rethink what's really happening in our classrooms. Because when more than 1/3 of students are bored and only a few truly enjoy learning, that's not a student problem. That's a design problem. I wonder, what would happen if we stopped managing behavior and started engineering engagement?
Next time on Beyond the Margins.
Honestly, Dr. Butts, I just feel like working and helping children is just what God sent me to do. That's the thing that keeps me grounded, knowing that I can make a child's world a little bit better for them after we depart.
Yeah.
After I depart from them, whether it's daily or whether I only met them as a PPW maybe 3 or 4 times. I feel like it's my duty to pour into children.
Thank you for joining us on Beyond the Margins. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, share this episode, rate and review the show, and let's keep the dialogue going. If you would like to connect, email me at Sohn@beyondthemarginsllc.com. That's SOHN@beyondthemarginsllc.com. It's been a pleasure being with you. Until next time, keep teaching, keep learning, keep leading, and keep pushing beyond the margins.